photographers. This video is to help you feel a little more prepared in creating your photographer presentation and to support you in doing a great job. So first, I just want to be sure that you've looked over and understand the expectations for the presentation. And all the details are written out for you on Canvas, and we've started to talk about them in class. And so what you're going to do is create an 8-minute presentation about the work of a fine art photographer. Your slideshow will be well designed, showing some of the artist's most significant works throughout his or her life and career. And your thesis, more or less, is to be able to show and articulate why the photographer is historically significant, why they're important. And then I want you also to speak with a sense of preparedness and authority and enthusiasm for your subjects so that you're sort of filling the role of the teacher that day. It's not just about you presenting, but it's about your classmates learning and building aesthetic as a group so that we know what good photography looks like and we can create it ourselves. To be able to do this well, you want to be prepared with high quality sources of information. And so the libraries of the Barbara Roche Library at NARICS, Webster University Library are great places to get print books and journal articles through their databases. And then if you choose to do some online work, there's also some great resources that you can check out, such as the Museum of Modern Art website, the J. Paul Getty Museum site, and you're welcome to do your own research so long as they're authoritative sources online. So you'll need to get 3 sources, and one of them should be in print. There's a bunch of photographers to choose from, and you have already selected them, or we're going to do that in class still, depending on which group this is. We'll talk about when the presentation will be, and then most importantly, I want you to look at what to include in your presentation. So at least 10 high quality photographs, because we want to see the work. That's the main thing, is we want to see the work of this artist. And then contextual information that's helpful is the time period the artist is working, the technology that they were using, what kind of camera, processes, any information you're able to find about that is great. And then historical background information that relates to the photography. Notice I say avoid TMI because we don't need to know what time they were born, what their aunt's name was. Keep the contextual information relevant. So like the fact that World War I is going on during this photographer's career is relevant historical information. Biographical information, like if, let me think, let's say they were a soldier in World War I, to keep with that analogy, that's useful information. And then we want to hear about the photographer's influences and the themes and subject matter that they tended to work with throughout their career. Influences means like things or people or kind of world happenings that drew them toward the themes and subject matter. And it'll be most important that you use examples of photographs when you're explaining this. I want you to show that you're able to interpret imagery. And so for at least 2 of the photos, you're going to take a little more time to describe them in detail. So describe their visual qualities. What makes it strong in composition, design elements, exposure, darkroom techniques, and what makes them significant? So what's the story, the mood, the symbolism, the intention, the meaning that you can draw from it? And maybe you'll have an art historian from your source that's kind of helping you parse this out, or maybe it's your interpretation. But you're going to be describing those 2 images at least in a little more detail than maybe some of the others. And then finally, when you summarize, come back to what is so significant about this photographer. Why is it important that we know about him or her? And then conclude with just a lesson that we can take away. So these last 2 bullet points are kind of different ways of looking at the same idea, right? So what can we now, as photographers, learn from this significant photographer. So some people have put it in like a practical sort of lesson. Some people have used a quote or specific technique that he or she introduced or advanced within the history of photography. So that's what's to include. As far as kind of the slideshow itself, keep it well designed because that's helpful. You do want an image on every slide, but having large chunks of text that your audience is trying to read while you're talking is not necessarily helpful. And for all the images that you have, be sure that they're labeled with the title and the year, because outside of that context, it's kind of hard to figure. It's just easier to follow along. And I want you to use high quality images. So if it's pixelated when you copy it into your presentation, it's not a good one to use. If you go to Google, let's see, I'll do it right now actually. Google Images. And if you're to type in, let's say, I'll use Imogen Cunningham. So Imogen Cunningham's photography work is all here supposedly, right? Now I definitely want to click on these links and be sure that they're coming from a source that is reputable, and so I can be confident that it's really her photograph. For instance, like this one, iphf.org, I happen to know is the International Photography Hall of Fame, so I'd feel pretty good about this one. But what I want you to do is go to more. Oops, not more. No, what am I looking for? Looking for tools. Aha. Okay, it's over here. So go to tools. And you can sort them by size. So if you go to size and put large, you'll only get the big ones that won't be pixelated when you are using them in your presentation. So that's one way to find good images. The other way would be to just scan them from the books that you get from the library, for instance. And there's, I'm sure, other ways as well that you'll figure out. So okay. You're gonna speak in front of a group. So I want you to have practiced at least once and to look over this list of things to keep in mind as you're practicing. And then one thing I'll always say is at the end, people have a hard time kind of figuring out how to conclude. So instead of just saying, and that's all I got, just saying thank you for listening is a great way to conclude. On the day that the presentation is due, I want you to submit it to Canvas either as a PowerPoint or a Google Slides link, or maybe it's a Prezi, for instance, but you're going to be sure that it's submitted before the class starts so that I have time to download them. And then the rubric that I'll give you is you'll either bring with you or I'll provide it in class. Again, it depends on kind of the group. But check in about that before the day. And then I've got some information down at the bottom that I won't go through right now, but they're just some tips on how to find high quality sources and how to format your sources in MLA. Okay, so enough about the expectations. Let's see an example presentation. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Andrei Kertész, who is a Hungarian-American immigrant photographer, and I'll just give you a preview of some of these thumbnails of kind of how I prepared my slideshow. Notice that I really don't have a ton of text outside of titles and years, and I've really fully focused on the images, and so all the information is going to come from me talking. And this video, of course, is helpful, but it's not the same as the presentations because you'll be in person in front of your classmates giving these presentations, where right now you're just hearing my voice. So that would be the difference. But let's try this. Oh, shoot. I'm going to pause this video here so that I can reset it so you can see the whole screen. So part 2 to be continued.